So you're doing super well, bro. 26, you got like a really solid portfolio, heaps of equity. What's the goal? What do you want to achieve? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, so to be honest, I always wanted to.
All right, hi everyone at home. We got another awesome podcast episode today. Today we got Aman, super young and just absolutely killing it. I was actually thinking of what are we going to call this podcast video? I was thinking something like Gen Z Moggs with his elite property portfolio, but we'll figure out a fun name to get into. But before we get into your portfolio, you're up at I think close to 9 or so by now, absolutely killing it. Before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Aman?
Yeah, so Aman is a 26-year-old from a little town in India. Aman came to the great country of Australia at the age of 11, and I grew up in Adelaide. I then moved to Melbourne at the age of 21, 22, and I've been here since. Started my investing journey about the age of 23.
Nice.
And at 26 now, I've got a decent portfolio, and I'm enjoying the journey. Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Nice. So you lived your whole life in Adelaide. Tell us a little bit about that. What was life in Adelaide like?
Adelaide is a smaller town to Melbourne, right? But it's a very good town. Adelaide has a special place in my heart. It's a very relaxed sort of upbringing. There's not too much stress. Unlike in Melbourne, it feels like sometimes a bit of a rat race, right? Yeah. When you're in the city and
right.
you're on the freeways, in the traffic, it's a bit of a rat race.
If you think Melbourne's a rat race, you got to go to Sydney, bro. That's like the rat race. Sydney's a bit intense, but I know what you mean. I feel like Melbourne's becoming like late. When I first came here, maybe because I was living in Brunswick and I was in uni at the time, so nothing felt like a rat race, but it feels like it's starting to get a bit more hectic, but definitely not Sydney level. But yeah, moved to Melbourne. What brought you to Melbourne?
To be honest, it was just career opportunity. I had sort of capped out at the level of earnings I could get in Adelaide as an employee, right? As a PAYG employee. So it was partly that, probably 50%. And the other 50% was probably me and my partner. So at the time we were dating, I was in Adelaide and she was actually based in Brisbane. And we couldn't agree on where to go. I didn't really want to move to Brisbane. She didn't really want to move to Adelaide. So we agreed, let's just settle on Melbourne. And that's exactly what we did. We kept it very simple. Yeah.
Nice. You're like, yo, beast, bro. You're mogging, you're risen. What else are you doing, bro? No, that's good, bro. That's good. Melbourne meets close to halfway.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome, man. And how you like in Melbourne? I mean, like Melbourne gets a lot of trash in the property space, but leaving out like property investment from a livability perspective, I love Melbourne. I think it's like one of the best places to be. Good fun, super multicultural, heaps of really good food. Where's your headspace? Are you enjoying living in Melbourne?
I agree with that 100%. I think Melbourne is probably the greatest place to live as a city and to work as a young person. The food here is the best in the world. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
When I go to Sydney, and I have been a couple of times, not that I've enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
When I go to Sydney, I can't find that same level of food, culture, vibes, all in one location. Actually, as a property person, right, as a person who's an enthusiast about property, I actually went to Sydney, I want to say a year ago or maybe a year and a half ago. And I said, okay, I'm pretty bored. There's not really much to do here. And I was like, okay, I'll go to Sydney and I want to see the most expensive real estate in the world or in Australia, right? So I drove up to Vaucluse or that side of town and I went over there. I was like, oh, there's nothing special about this, you know? So Sydney, I feel, is a very, very overpriced and sort of very expensive property market for a Gen Z person, I'd say. And I don't really find anything special about it. Whereas Melbourne, I think, is a very harmonious, very well-flowing city. There's lots of different types of people you meet in Melbourne. There is a bit of a rat race in the city, but outside that, it's a very, very good place to be as a young person, I think.
Yeah. No, makes heaps of sense. I think honestly, if Melbourne had better weather, it'd just be like elite.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think like that's the only, especially for me, because I don't love the cold. I was born and raised in Botswana. You're from which part of India did you say you're from, bro?
I'm from Haryana.
Haryana, yeah. So it's like that's not super cold as well. It's pretty warm, just near Delhi, right? Yeah. So it's a warmer state as well. So it's like I feel like that's the only thing missing in Melbourne.
Yeah,
but overall, like awesome. I also feel like you've probably started a war in the comments. All the Sydney siders are gonna be like, "Nah, Sydney's the best." They get super passionate about it. Sydney versus Melbourne, but no, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now that's a little bit about you, your history. Again, we're going to jump into property. Everyone's probably waiting for it. But tell us, what do you do for fun? What does your life look like day to day? Do you classify yourself as millennial? 26? Is that millennial or Gen Z?
It's just Gen Z.
Yeah.
So Gen Z, I believe, is from 1999, and I was born in 1999.
Nice,
so I would say
beautiful.
I'm more Gen Z than anything.
Yeah.
And actually, as I was growing up, right, as a teenager, I thought once I get into my 20s, into my later 20s, which is where I am now, I thought I would lose touch with the younger generation, right? I feel like it's the opposite. I'm more on TikTok than anyone else that I know. So I haven't lost a step.
No, same, bro. I feel like I'm definitely millennial because I'm like 30, so 1995. But I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm just telling myself I'm trying to keep my youthful energy, but I feel like I got more like a Gen Z vibe, you know what I'm saying? Just have a good time, whatever. I can't do millennial humor, you know what I mean? Millennial humor, it just...
You have to do the millennial pause. When you start recording a video, whenever you do a promotional, just pause. Hello.
Just too cringy for me. Beautiful, man. No, that's interesting. Let's start talking about like your investing, your wealth building, so on and so forth, right? Now, before we jump into like the specifics, the deals, how you approached it, what got you started? What made you, because you went down the rent vesting direction, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful, same. And I think like especially, I think if you were living in Melbourne between 2020 to 2024, like rent vesting was probably one of the best things you could have done, maybe even up until 2025. How did you get started? Like, you know, most people at 23, they're not thinking of buying a property. They're, you know, out there with their friends, they're having a good time, you know, they're like, where's the next party at? They're traveling, all that kind of stuff. What made you start with property investing?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting that you asked that. I feel like part of property is just an investment asset to me, right? I've grown to love it more and more over time. But it started off not as that. It started off as purely an investment strategy, right? So I'll take you back to just after high school when I was in university. I started investing in shares. And as I was investing in shares, I started using leverage in shares. I started trading contracts for difference. I started trading crypto. And as it does happen, I did lose a lot of my money. I think I might have invested all of my life savings from the age of 13 when I started working to the age of 21. I had about 100,000 saved. I invested that. I had great returns initially, and then I lost it all. I lost everything, and I went into debt. I was probably minus $25,000, and I thought to myself, well, this is definitely a lesson. And a lesson that I needed to learn early. But I need to figure out what that lesson is. So then I broke it down over many months as I was working, trying to pay off that debt. And I realized what I loved about the thrill of investing and where I saw the benefits was leverage, right? But where I lost my edge and where I lost all my money was also leverage because it was dangerous, right? So then I thought, okay, how can I access this leverage but not have as much risk of getting liquidated straight away? And eventually I then did land onto the asset of residential property, right? How can I leverage the same amount of money that I did in shares versus property? And it's, to be honest, it's quite similar nowadays. You can get a loan, you can get a property purchase for about 5%, which is, I want to say, 20 times the leverage, which is pretty similar to the maximum you can do on shares. So that's how I got started in property. I just wanted to access leverage, to be honest. And I built my knowledge from there I bought my first property, and then I built my knowledge from there.
Beautiful.
In terms of accessing equity or getting better interest rates or fixed versus variable, lender's mortgage insurance. I started learning those things along the way. But it all started with the idea of accessing leverage.
You know, there's a couple of interesting points you've made over there. I feel like the first big thing for a lot of young investors is just understanding risk, right? You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, a lot of young investors, they're attracted to things like crypto, all of these other assets where you can make crazy money, right? If you get lucky, you could be retired by 22, right? Like, you know, and there's heaps of people, you know, they bought the right asset, sold it at the right time, you know, probably didn't even have 100K, probably had like 10, 20, right? But in those asset classes, for every one person that lost, there's probably for every one person that won, there's probably 50 to 100 that lost, right? Whereas in property, for every 100 people that win, there's probably 5 to 10 that lose, right? Yeah. The losers are, you got to be like pretty bad to lose in property. Like you either bought a really bad investment or you just couldn't manage your cash flow, right? It's probably like 2 to 3% losers, whereas in other asset classes, the percentage of losers is a lot higher, right? And I think that's, you know, it's, for you learned it through experience. Ideally, the people who are watching this are going to learn it through knowledge, right? But in all honesty, like similar happened to me. I don't think that level of numbers, but you know, I got really deep into the crypto phase at one point as well, and you know, lost a bit of money. You know, going down into like as altcoin as you can get. You know what I mean?
It's like a rite of passage almost.
Yeah, it's literally it's like, honestly, it's a bit fun. You know, you get into that phase. Like I was with a couple of friends and we were buying the most random coins, bro. Like if I think of some of those names, they were like, you know, like just random crap, right? But I feel like that particular thing, like understanding risk and how to approach risk is super, super important, right? And then the second point you made about leverage, I think that's super important as well, right? You build wealth through leverage, right? It's whether it's capital leverage, leveraging other people's money, or whether you're building a business and you're leveraging other people's time. The only real way to build wealth is through leverage, right? Yeah. Or to build like significant wealth, Absolutely. Right? If not, you're trading your time for money. And there's only so far that can get you unless you're like extremely high income. And even then, heaps of it just gets taken away with tax, right? So that point of leverage, I feel like is super important.
Absolutely.
Now, I do want to come to a little bit earlier than that, right? Because it seems like for you just talked about how you shifted your mindset into property. But a lot of people at 23, they're not even doing stocks or anything. They're just not even thinking about wealth, right? Now, it sounds like you started doing that pretty young. Yeah. How did you develop that mindset to think about, you know, the importance of wealth building?
To be honest, I don't have a very interesting answer for you. I always just wanted to have wealth. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that.
You were just on that grind, baby.
I just always wanted to be to live a good life, to have a great family, to have a comfortable family that is not financially stressed, and I always just wanted to have wealth. So it's really that simple for me.
Okay, beautiful, bro. Yeah. I want to ask you another question, right? Now, I mean, I keep saying that, but that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this podcast, asking you questions. So there's probably some guy watching this at home, you know, like sitting on his bed eating Doritos and he's probably like, oh, you know what, screw this guy, he's a schmuck. The reason he owns 10 properties is because he didn't even have a life. He just put all of his money into property. He didn't enjoy any of his life so far. How did you find the balance between lifestyle and investing? And for those out there watching, like how much of a sacrifice is that, you know, building a portfolio? Because there is some level of a sacrifice, but how do you as an individual find the balance and decide how much you want to sacrifice?
Yeah. Early on in my life, I really did think that there was some meaning to balance, right? But the older I get and the more I realize that balance isn't what helps you be successful. You have to disregard the idea of balance. What I now try to do is work as hard as possible, and then I try to, when I have time, to enjoy my life as much as possible. So I don't try to balance the two. I don't believe in work-life balance. I try to work as hard as possible when I'm working. I try to enjoy my life as much as possible when I'm enjoying my life. So that's the way I view it. But early on in my life, I did try to think about You know, if I just work 40 to 50 hours a week, or if I work maybe 55 to 60 hours a week, that puts me ahead enough of rest of my peers. But that's not really the way it works. You have to work unbelievable hours. You have to keep working. You can never stop working. So that's the way I view it now. And that mindset shift occurred for me at around the age of 21, 22. And that's the way I view it now. I just work until I drop, and then I'm ready to party.
Yeah, beautiful. It's kind of like, what's that song? Is it Akon from back in the day? Is it David Guetta's like, work hard, play hard?
That's right, yeah.
And it's like, honestly, I feel like I have a similar philosophy. It's like, me personally, I hate what I call limbo time. Yeah. It's like, I hate doing nothing. You know what I mean? It's like watching a TV show, but I've already watched this TV show 5 times. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like going to like a substandard restaurant just because I need to quickly eat something, right? For me, it's like grind like crazy, but then once you're done grinding, it's like we go in Nobu, right? Yeah. We eat in like a really good meal. We're like we're like traveling to places that we really like. You're really enjoying life, right?
Yeah.
That limbo time, it's like people tell themselves like, okay, this is me finding balance. But in all honesty, you're kind of not experiencing life. You're just like doing nothing, right? So it's like what you want to do is when you're working, you want to work like a machine. But when you're not working, you also want to do if you're relaxing, you want to be like in full relaxation mode, right? Yeah. Like, I don't know if you ever, like sometimes when you're in a downward trend, like you're behind on work, whatever, you're constantly in this space of regret. You're like, when you're working, you're like, I should be relaxing. When you're relaxing, you're like, I got so much work to do. So it's like whatever you're doing, you feel bad about doing it, all right? But once you get past that, it's like when you're working really hard, you enjoy the work, you double down. But then when you're not working, you just do what you want to do and you enjoy that. Yeah, I love that philosophy. Beautiful. Nice. So we've talked a little bit about mindset, right? Let's talk about your property journey. Right? Tell us a little bit about that, how you got started and your property philosophy, investment philosophy, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I want to say I tried to research as much as possible before my first purchase. And what I wanted to do was access as much leverage as possible coming out of the loss in shares. So when I had that loss in shares, I then obviously had to work to pay off the debt and then build a deposit. And I did that over a year and a half to 2 years. I had saved about 35 to 45,000, somewhere thereabouts. I wanted to buy a property in Adelaide because that's where I knew, that's the area that I knew, right? So I researched and I looked at yield. Yield is the first metric that I started with, and that's all I knew at the time. So I started calling agents like crazy. I really wanted to find the best deal. And every time there was a property coming up in the Elizabeth and the Playford area, I would just call the agent and I would just try to network with them, really. I would try to build a relationship with them. And eventually 4 or 5 months had gone by and I couldn't find a deal because everything that I wanted to purchase was going way above asking price. And then eventually
This is what, like 2020?
This is, I want to say 2023.
Yeah. And at that time, Adelaide was crazy.
Adelaide was very
Adelaide
crazy.
I mean, like Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane were crazy. Yep. But Adelaide was insane. I remember Playford Market back in 2023. There's one agent in Playford, or like they have like their companies like Green.
Yep.
They do like heaps of deals in Playford.
Yeah, I believe Edge Realty.
Yeah. They're like, and they're pretty good on the negotiations, man. They're like we've, worked with, we've done a few deals in that area. Like they're like out of the sales agents we've worked with, they're like really good from like good
for the vendor.
Really good for the vendor, which makes our job a little bit difficult, but good on them, you know what I mean? If they're watching, shout out to you guys for doing a fantastic job for your vendors. But anyway, that's a bit of a random tangent. So Elizabeth, you were out there hunting?
Yeah, so I was hunting, I was calling, and everything was going above asking price. Prices were, I felt like, sitting around 340 to 350,000 for a 3-bedroom house on circa 500 to 600 square meters of land.
Crazy.
And that's what was being listed, but they were actually selling for closer to 400,000 at the time, right?
Yeah.
So I kept calling. Then this house comes up on the market, and it had been sitting on the market for a while. So it had gone through a contract failure actually, and then it had just come up back on the market. And then I made a verbal offer to the agent. I just threw a number out there because he previously had it listed for about 325,000, right? So we're 6 months down the track. I know he could sell it for 400,000, but I just wanted to get a deal, and I didn't know how to get a deal. So I said, okay, I'll just offer you 325,000. And he said, yep, that's a good offer. And then my eyes lit up. I'm like, how can that be a good offer? But anyway, I made the offer and I didn't hear back. I didn't hear back for a long time. And then a couple of weeks later, he rings me back. He's saying, are you still interested in that property? I said, yes, I am. He said, okay, no worries. And then nothing again. I didn't hear from him after that. And then I kept following up with him every few weeks. What I'd realized about 3-4 weeks into the deal is that it actually had a HIA order on the property. So that's an improvement order, which means that most banks will not lend against it. So I saw where that scared the market, I actually saw opportunity. So I did as much research as I could on the HIA order and what I could do to get around it to acquire this property for 325,000 because I knew it was an absolute steal, right? So I made an interesting offer to the agent. I said, how about I give you 325,000 and I will pay for the HIA order to be removed, right? And he said, okay, that sounds good, because what I'd learned by then is that the vendor was a bit cash strained and he didn't really want to do the repairs and he didn't really see the value in the property. He just wanted to sell it, get the money, move on. He didn't want to do the HIA order. He just didn't want to deal with it. So I worked with him. I made an offer. I kept following up for months and months and months. I said, we will pay for the repairs. We'll pay for the repairs. This was, I want to say, around the time of May 2023. And then we get to about August, right? And then he says, okay, we're ready to do a contract. I'm like, okay, let's go, right? Because I still hadn't found another deal. So we did the contract, and the contract stated that I would pay for the repairs. And we then did a build and pest, which was a pretty substandard build and pest. And
like in terms of the findings or the actual quality, like the building and pest inspector didn't do a good enough job of looking into things.
So there was some things with the property that needed to be improved. It wasn't the report itself. It was just to do with the property. I think there was a couple of tiles broken here. There was leaking gutters and blocked drains and all this other stuff. At the time, I didn't understand all that stuff, but I just went back to the agent. I said, I'll just try it on them. I said, the building pest didn't come too well. I don't know about this property. And he said, okay. And then I said, oh, you know what? Maybe I won't pay for the repairs. Maybe you guys have to pay for the repairs. And at that time, I already had it under contract and the vendor was ready to sell. So I did end up negotiating out of the HIA order, which was the value of about $10,000 it would have cost. So I immediately got that off the property. And from there on, it took about 3 to 4 months of following up every week with the agent until the HIA order got removed, right? So then it got removed in November, and then we were ready to settle. By that time, the property was worth $450,000.
Crazy.
And I just settled on my first property for a grand price of $325,000.
25% growth before settlement.
Absolutely.
Insane. How are you comfortable going for a deal of that level of risk? And I'm assuming a lot of the people who are going to be watching this are going to be younger people, right? They're going to be people watching it, and probably the thumbnail is going to show them, like, hey, this young investor. So it's going to be young people watching this, right? How are you comfortable going for that level of risk? And do you think it's important that younger investors, 20 to 25, pick up more risk to get more growth compared to, someone in their 40s, right? Where they probably have family, kids, they can't take as much risk. What are your thoughts on how you approach risk and advice you have for young investors?
So the thing about risk is you have to take some risk, but you don't have to take all of the risk, right? The way to de-risk an investment is to learn as much about it and get comfortable with it. With my first investment, for example, what I knew was where the market was heading. right? I knew that a house like this was selling for 400,000 because I was doing the research. I was calling agents. I was trying to see how many offers they were getting, which was somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20 offers for every listing, right, at the time. So I knew the property was worth more than what I could get for it, and that was because of that HIA order, right? So it was about de-risking the deal. Now, the HIA order in itself was a risk. So I then tried to de-risk by negotiating a deal that works for both parties. So I tried to de-risk by using comparable sales, especially in property. That's the way to de-risk yourself, is to know what the underlying value of that property is. So if you're buying a property for, let's say, 700,000, you have to be sure that it's at least, at the very minimum, worth 700,000, that it's not worth less than that, right? So the easiest way to do that is to just go on realestate.com, just have a look at what properties are selling for nearby. If you're buying a 500 square meter property, which is 3 bedroom, 2 bathrooms, just have a look in the last 6 months what is sold nearby, which is 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on 500 square meters of land, roughly. That's the way to get comfortable with the risk. There's always going to be risk, but you have to get comfortable. And the way to get comfortable is to know what you're doing. Knowledge
is the biggest way to mitigate risk. Beautiful. Nice. Okay. Awesome, man. So you got the first one done. Sounds like it was a bit of a hectic deal.
Yes.
Now smash that out. How did things compound from there, right? It's been 2-3 years since.
Yeah.
Right? How did you go from one to multiple?
Yeah. So as soon as I settled on that property, the settlement valuation came in at around 360,000, which is a little bit higher than what I paid for it. I had a 97% LVR loan on the property, and that meant I probably had somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 in equity. So I then started doing a lot of research during that settlement period and learning more about property game. I then found a broker, which was very, very good, right? I still have that broker today. And I got in touch with him. Hey, can I release...
Give him a shout out, bro. Don't feel shy to say his name.
I use Dash.Finance.
Nice.
Callum is the head of Dash.Finance.
Nice.
And I've been using him since before he was working with Dash.Finance before was Babylon Advisory.
Nice.
He was just he was doing his own thing. He was posting TikToks. I found him on there.
Yeah.
Now he's big time. He's I think he sold half his business to Dashdot.
Yeah.
And he's handling all of the Dashdot is one of the biggest buyers agencies, right?
Yeah.
So he's handling all the finance for the clients over there, which is a big amount, right?
Beautiful. Shout out to Callum.
Yeah.
And shout out to brokers in general. You know what I mean? A good broker makes a huge difference, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
like if you got a good broker, they know what they're doing. They know how to, especially like I always tell people, don't go with someone who can just get the loan done. Go with like an investment specialist broker. The amount of strategic value they're going to unlock in terms of borrowing capacity, so on and so forth, is going to be huge. Do you feel like you would have been able to get to the amount of properties that you have now without a good quality broker?
No, not a chance. Not a chance. When I first got in touch with Callum, he was so informative, right? He was straight to business. He's a bit like I am in that sense. He was straight to business. He was very willing to explain how things work in the lending world. And immediately he said, okay, here's what we can do. We can refinance get a new valuation done with ANZ. ANZ was the first loan at 97%. He said, we can get another valuation done 3 months later. And that's exactly what we did. So the property settled in December, and then we went to February. We got another valuation done, came in at 390, right? So then he said, okay, what we'll do is we'll refinance back up to 95% LVR, right? Instead of 97. So it went from 97, had a bit of growth in it already, and then we refinanced at 95%, and got at least $80,000.
Wouldn't you have to pay pretty crazy levels of LMI at such high LVRs?
Well, not exactly. So when I bought it for $325,000, I think my LMI was only about $10,000, right? And it was capitalized into the loan, so
nice.
You don't pay it up front. And the interesting thing about ANZ is that I don't know if they still do this, if they still have this policy, is if you refinance and do an equity release with the same bank or the same lender, usually they will charge you the difference between the LMI on the first loan and the total mortgage debt on the second loan.
Yeah.
So if your loan goes from 300,000 to 400,000, and you've already paid LMI on the $300,000 loan, they will only charge you the difference of the $100,000 additional lending which you're accessing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if that's still one of their policies, because that makes a pretty big difference, right? Because then you can, like, as you grow your portfolio, you can keep you don't have to stack up crazy amounts of LMI, right? Okay, that makes sense. So you got the first one, got a good broker, now started to look at your second one. Where was your headspace around that?
Yeah, my headspace was, I love this. But because I'd done so well on my first one, and I knew I'd done well, I was really, really stoked. So I went to the bank, got that equity release done, and I was under contract on my second one straight away.
Where did you go? Was it similar area?
Same area, similar area.
I was saying just before this video started, I was saying Aman needs to get a tattoo of Queen Elizabeth, because you just bought all the heaps of properties in that Clayford Elizabeth area, right? Because nice, that's solid, man. Yeah, beautiful. So similar area. Now, what was your area selection methodology? Do you feel like you got a bit lucky, or do you feel like you had built a good methodology prior to picking the areas?
I don't think I built a good methodology, to be honest, compared to where I am now, right? I see property very, very differently. I feel like I've almost become an expert in residential property now compared to then. At that time, all I was really looking at was yield and affordability. I just looked at all of Adelaide and I saw what's the most affordable area and has the highest income, so that I can have a cash flow positive property, right? That's what I was chasing, really. I wanted to have a property that pays for itself. Nowadays, I don't look at it like that, right? There's other metrics to look at. But at that time, it was a good way to look at it, right? Because I
made a lot of money.
That's right. You know,
and like 2021 to 2025, and even right now, affordable markets are pumping.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like prior to COVID, affordable markets were not very attractive to investors. I feel like prior to COVID, the investment methodology was a lot more around this blue chip suburb ideology, right? It's like, let's go to blue chip suburbs. The potential is a lot more in blue chip suburbs. But then what happened is that was the philosophy for such a long time, probably since 2008. That was the main philosophy. And then as a result, all these affordable areas hardly grew, right? Like you take like low SES areas in Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, they had like not grown for so long.
Yeah.
And then they just had so much growth in them, right? That they just pumped like crazy, right? Yeah. They had so much growth, plus the yields were so high, right? Like imagine like, you know, you think about buying 7% yield properties in capital cities, right? That was possible 3 to 4 years ago, nowhere near possible now.
Not at all.
Okay, amazing. So I want to talk about, we're not going to go through every single purchase, you know what I mean? Because we'll be here for a couple of hours. At what point did you start to have to get a bit more fancy, and how did you get past, you know, just most people get stuck at 2 to 3. How did you get beyond that borrowing capacity wall to like the amount that you have?
Yeah. So thanks to my broker, I learned about trust lending very quickly. So when I bought my first one, I only had capacity for one more in my personal name. And I really wanted to find out how can these people build 10 million portfolios, right? So when I got in touch with my broker, he explained it all to me, how SPVs work. They're called special purpose vehicles. So companies, trusts, those type of structures, right? So he actually advised me on setting up a company in a trust structure to try and isolate my debt within one entity, right? And I didn't really understand it at the time, but I went through the process because it made sense to me. It made sense that you would get a loan within the company, and the loan is directly tied to that company rather than being my personal name. So that's exactly what I did. And he explained it very clearly to me. He said, if you have a company or a company in a trust where you buy a property in there, as soon as you're cash flow positive or cash flow neutral within that entity, you can actually get an accountant's letter to say that this property is servicing itself, or this entity is, I'm not sure on the exact terminology, but you get a letter saying that this property, this entity can service its own debt. Once you get that letter, you can then go and set up a new entity separate to the entity A, and then you can get lending against your personal name, whatever you have in your personal name, and entity B, let's call it. So then the debt from entity A is effectively not measured in your borrowing.
Nice. There you go, bro. And that's like a lot of high-level investors do that. Obviously, there's been some changes to that lately, but that's a conversation for a different day. Let's talk about. So you're doing super well, bro. 26. You got like a really solid portfolio, heaps of equity. What's the goal? What do you want to achieve? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. So to be honest, I always wanted to live a comfortable life, right? And what I view property as is the vehicle to get there. I'd like to grow my portfolio in the short term, and then I'd like to transition that portfolio to more of a cash flow portfolio. The idea is to obviously attain financial freedom. So where we are in our portfolio now, we have 9 different assets, residential assets. That includes 1 apartment and 1 townhouse, and the rest are all houses with a surplus land. So ideally what happens from here is we either acquire more property or we start transitioning the existing assets into adding value to them, right? So either we build granny flats or we subdivide with the land that we have to try and generate that extra bit of value, increase the portfolio valuation, but also try and do really, really well in the cash flow side of things. So that's really the next step. And then after that, the idea would be in, let's say, 3 to 5 years to sell down some of them and then maybe transition to a more of a commercial portfolio, to try and have more cash flow in my life, to get my time back, maybe not work as much anymore, things like that. So really financial freedom is the goal for me.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's awesome. And and it seems like you can achieve it a lot younger than most people would be able to. Okay, beautiful. Last of the major questions that I have for you, and then we'll aim to tie it off. There'll be a bunch of people, hopefully there'll be a bunch of people watching this, right? And I want to target the young people watching this, right? People who haven't bought their first property. So I guess since you started, things have changed a bit, right?
Yes.
When you started, there was potential to get like 5-6% yields. There was properties available for 300K that were in capital cities and good growth assets, right? Whereas now the landscape of the market has shifted. Doesn't mean property investing is bad. In fact, it's still very, very valuable, and you can build crazy wealth from it. But I guess some people who are looking at the market, they maybe feel a little bit despondent, discouraged. They feel like, okay, it's too late for me, right? What sort of advice do you have for those young people that haven't bought their first property and they feel like it's too late for them?
Well, it's not too late for them, right? Because if you're going to look at most premium markets in all these capital cities, you're going to feel afraid. You're going to look at some of these price tags and think to yourself, gee, I can't afford this. But you have to be really strategic. You have to think long term and be really strategic. Yeah, what you have to do is you have to look at the market in its entirety. So if you're looking at a property which is 5 kilometers from the CBD, you're probably not going to be able to afford that as your first property. What you have to do is find more affordable markets, ones where you can actually afford to buy. These are markets maybe on the outskirts of Perth or on the outskirts of Adelaide, where in the Playford region or the Gawler region, you can still pick up properties for sub $500,000, right? Or you have to look at regional areas. And if you try and focus on those more affordable areas and focus on strategies like rent investing and try to educate yourself on these things, you can buy your first property, let it sit a little bit, and then you can transition eventually into those more premium assets, buy a house on the beach if you want to, right? So you can't think that the first property you're going to buy is going to be a mansion. That's the way I'd look at it, right?
For sure. I mean, you were in Melbourne, you could have ended up buying something. Your first property could have been like in Pascoe Vale for 1.5 million, and you probably that would have been the only property that you bought. That would have been the
only property I bought.
Yeah, okay, beautiful. Now, actually, one more question. Early on, you did a lot, like your first property, you hustled, you grind, you did a lot of it by yourself. I guess now towards the latter stage of your portfolio, you've started to, I guess, work with professionals a bit more. We worked on a couple of your recent transactions. Or what was the mindset shift in terms of doing it by yourself to then working with professionals?
Yeah, so for me, it's really a time management thing. I found that when I was buying my first couple of properties that I had the time to call multiple agents every day and then to try and source deals myself. As my portfolio has grown and my level of effort has grown in other areas of my life, right? I find that I'm really, really time poor. So what I wanted to do was not wait around too long and to try and look for a property for months. What I wanted was to get into my next investment as soon as possible. So that's why I did reach out to you guys, and we did get a really good deal done very, very quickly, right? Which I applaud you for. So for me, it's a time management thing. And let's say if it wasn't me, if it was someone who was a beginner, it'd be really, really tough for them to find a deal like what you and I can source, right? What your team can source, what I can source. So for a beginner, I really would recommend them to use a buyer's agent, but also be careful about the buyer's agents that you use, right? So I would recommend them to educate themselves, use a buyer's agent if you can, and that's the way to go about it for definitely your first purchase at least. So
beautiful. Yeah. Most important question: what are we getting for dinner after this?
It's going to be a chicken parm.
It's going to be a chicken parm.
It's going to be a chicken parm.
It's going to be a chicken parm. Beautiful. All right, Aman, honestly, I really appreciate you making the time, coming on board. Honestly, I think we didn't even cover 50% of what I want to cover.
We'll have to do it again. We'll have to go into a longer session.
Yeah, today we talked a lot about the mindset stuff, which I actually think is the most important. Next one, we'll jump into the deals. We'll talk about which properties, the yields, where, locations, methodology, so on and so forth. But I really appreciate you coming, making the time for it. And for all of those watching at home, if you guys ever need anything property related, just feel free to reach out to us at Pathway Property, and we're always happy to have a chat.
Thank you for having me.